Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to talk with you today about checking initial placement in Read Naturally Live. There is a handout available in the chat box that will follow along with the slides that I will be presenting. Everything you need will be visible on the screen I am sharing with you now, but that handout can be a nice resource for you down the road. Teacher responsibilities, of course, include monitoring student performance. And it is one of the most important parts of implementing Read Naturally Live for several reasons. First, it's what you do the vast majority of the school year, right? The beginning of the school year has a lot of little lifts, right? Getting the program up and running, training your students how to do it, getting students placed, all these little things that have to happen right at the beginning of the school year in order to get the program off the ground. But then once it's up and running, the rest of the school year, you're monitoring student performance and making adjustments based on what you see in the data. So we're going to start today with talking about the initial phase of that, which is checking initial placement. And it's always important to keep in mind that we need to maximize the students' achievement, right? These students are behind. They are struggling readers. And so we need them to make as much progress as possible. Intuitively, we all know that growth happens best when you push yourself, right? When you're challenged. So students need to work in a level that is difficult for them, but not to the point of frustration, right? We have struggling readers, many of whom have struggled for a long time. And so we want them to be challenged, but if they get to frustration, we might lose them. So we have to balance that level, have them work hard and be challenged in the difficult material, but not to the point of frustration. The story goal that they have while working in Read Naturally Live needs to be one that is difficult to reach, but is reachable, right? We want students to have to practice several times. We want them to have to work hard in order to meet their story goals, but we also need them to meet their story goals so they have that moment of standing on the mountaintop, right? And getting the awards and seeing that they did meet their goals. So when we're trying this balancing act, we have two different phases of it that we call. The first one is initial placement checking. That's what we're talking about today. And the next phase is keeping students challenged over time. And we'll have another webinar about that in about a month or so. But checking initial placement is what happens this time of the school year, right? It's in the early fall, it's in September. Many of you are going to have a few stories passed by your students, which is the perfect time to check initial placement after 3 stories. We have something in our program that's called Data Mentor. Data Mentor is a AI, if you will, behind the scenes within the computer that is taking the data that your students compile. So as your students work through the program, the computer collects data on them, on how they're doing. And Data Mentor then will provide a suggestion to a teacher on whether or not the student's in the right spot. With checking initial placement, this suggestion will appear possibly after 1 story, after 2 stories, and after 3 stories. And if it's after 2 or 3 stories, it's taking averages. So the computer is taking the data and creating an average for the data points. And then it's deciding whether or not they're in the right spot. Okay, I'm going to show you a couple places where you can access those suggestions, where you can find out whether or not there's a suggestion in there. The first place is on the Pass Review Work page. So try to get yourself acclimated with this page. For those of you who are brand new and have not used the program yet, this may not look familiar, but for those of you who have been using it even for a short time, you have probably had to pass a student on a story. On the Pass Review Work page, right here, there are several tabs along the top. The final tab is called Data Mentor. If there is a red dot in that tab, it means there is a suggestion. So notice that none of the tabs have red dots with the exception of Data Mentor. And the only reason Data Mentor has a red dot right now is because there is a suggestion. Based on this student's data, the computer is suggesting that the student might need a higher goal. Okay. If the teacher clicks accept, the goal change happens immediately. If the teacher ignores it, when more data is collected, this suggestion may update based on that new data. Okay. You know more about your students than the AI built into this program knows. But for those of you who are new, it's nice to have a little support, a little guidance as you're beginning this process. And so some you may be more inclined to accept at the beginning, but know that it is just a suggestion. It isn't a mandate or a requirement. It's just a suggestion based off of what the collection of data that the student has gone through so far. So when we are talking about checking initial placement, it's important to realize it's actually our second phase of placement. We started out with conducting initial placement. We did a webinar on that a little while ago. And that is just what happens in order for students to start using the program, right? Which level and story goal is right when students begin in the program. Now what you're doing with checking initial placement is you're taking the data from the first few stories and you're asking yourself, if I had all this information on placement day, would I have still thought this was the right level and story goal for the student? So placement only has data from maybe one story, maybe two or three. It's a very small amount of data and it's solely based on fluency. But at checking initial placement, now you have more data because they've passed maybe two or three stories, and you have comprehension data. And so you're going to take the average, ideally from the first three, and compare it to what the initial level criteria is and what the initial goal criteria is. All right. And I'm going to explain that in just a few minutes. But first, I want you to know where you can find this information. The best report for analyzing data on your students is the report that's called the Students at a Glance report. So let me zoom in on this particular report. Notice in the left, we're going to start in the left-hand side, just like if it was a paragraph. The very first column is the series and level column. This student is working in the sequence series, level 2.5, tells you the date the level was started, the number of stories passed. Okay, so this is just kind of the general information about the student and where they're at. The next columns all include data that was collected from the program. This first column is called the cold timing column, and it includes two numbers that are separated by a forward slash. So it says 41/41. This is not a fraction. This is providing you with two separate data points. So the first number is the average of the cold timing score on the first three stories. And the second number is the average of the cold timing score on the most recent three stories. Okay. When a student has only passed three stories, these numbers are identical. Okay. Because the first three and the last three are the same three. So at this point, when students are at 1, 2, or 3 stories, all these columns are going to have identical numbers. Once they pass 4, 5, 6 stories, then the numbers will change because the computer is pulling data from different stories that the student worked on. The next column is the story goal column, then hot timing, expression rating, number of practices, percentage right in the quiz, and the number of words in the retell. And if the student was in the phonics series, there would be something about how many seconds it took to read the word list. Okay. I'm going to show you how to generate this report. So let me just pop out of my PowerPoint for a minute, and I'm going to go into my Read Live account. I'm going to log in as a teacher. So I'll enter my teacher user ID and my teacher password and log in. And I'm going to go to the home page. And from the home page, I can see that there is a reports tile in the lower right-hand corner. I can also locate the reports in this drop-down menu on the upper left-hand corner. Okay, so when we click on reports, we're brought to a place that has all the various reports that are available. The first couple are just administrative reports. So your roster, which will include user ID and password information. We also have placement reports, password reports. But this one over in the upper right corner is the Read Naturally Live reports. And the very first one is the Students at a Glance. So again, this is the best report for analyzing students' data and their progress. So I'm going to click on Students at a Glance. I can select one student, or I can select a whole group of students. Okay, so if I was going to do this on with my class, I would probably select all of them. Okay, or you can select one at a time, whatever you want. You click the Generate Selected button. In order to select the date range, you have to actually click into the calendar, but it will default to this school year. So it'll be August 1st of 2024 until the date that you're running the report. Okay, so August 1st of the current school year. And when you click Generate Report, now you can see this is a report on a student named Molly Anderson. And in the sequence series, level 3.5, this student has passed 8 stories. And I can see, take a look at these numbers now. Now the numbers are different because it's pulling data from story 1, 2, and 3 in this with this first number. The cold timing score after the first 3 was averaged at 82. The cold timing score after the most recent 3 was averaged at 91. So you can see how with a very quick glance, I can see that there is progress in these various areas. Okay, she's showing progress all across the board. Okay. So what you're going to do once you run that report, you can take a look at the placement ranges and see, is the student's cold timing score in the range for placement? If the cold timing score is in the range for placement, your student is in the right level. Because the computer would have said, select this level. So the information you need is the level the student's working in, and what their average words correct per minute score is on the cold timing. You can plug it into this table, and if it's in that range, that student is in the right spot from a fluency standpoint. But we also need to make sure their comprehension is good enough to leave them there. Okay. So the only reason you would make a change if the student's fluency is in the range, you would only make a change if their comprehension is very bad. And by very bad, I mean under 60%. So 30%, 40%, 50%. Those comprehension numbers, then regardless of their fluency score, we have to lower their level, right? Now, 60% is not where we want them ultimately, but it is good enough to leave them there at first. Research shows us that students are able to make comprehension gains so long as they can understand at least at 60%. So when you have a student who can understand at that percentile, they're still able to make gains and hopefully get up over 80%, right? That's where we want all of them. But we'll leave them where they are, assuming they can understand at 60%. So let's take a couple students. We're going to go through 3 different students and their data, and we're going to decide whether or not they're in the right level or have the right goal. All the questions are going to be on your screen. And all the information you need to answer the questions are also going to be visible on the screen that I'm sharing with you. Okay, so we're going to ask whether or not their cold timing score is in the placement range, and then make sure their quiz is good enough. Okay, so let's take a look at the Students at a Glance report. Rob is this middle student here. You can see we have data. He's passed 3 stories. His is average cold timing in the range for placement. So with this one, since you're might be new to this, I'm going to use my cursor to circle. Rob is working in level 3.0. It's the first column in the series and level section. His cold timing score is 70. That's the average cold timing score. Is that in the range? So take level 3.0 is the first row up here, because he's working from 1.0 through 3.0. Words correct per minute is 70. Is that in this range? No, it's not. If this happened on placement day, the computer would have said, keep testing. This is too easy of a level. Try the next level up. Okay, because he's outside the range on the high end. Now let's take a look and make sure that his quiz is good enough. The quiz, again, I'm going to help you try to find the quiz. The comprehension section is in the far right. And so his average quiz score is at 89. So his average cold timing score is not in the range, but his quiz is good enough. What would you do? What do you think you'd do? Would you continue Rob in level 3.0? Would you raise Rob to 3.5 because 3.0 seems a little easy? Or would you lower Rob to 2.5 because 3.0 is too hard? Remember, his score is outside the range on the high end. So we would raise him to 3.5. What's wonderful about this is since the release of Data Mentor, which is around this time last year, now you are given a suggestion. So on the pass review work page, when you are doing your pass timing with Rob, you're going to land on the pass review work page, and there would be a red dot for Rob. And if you click on that tab, it will tell you that the computer thinks the student should work in 3.5 now. It also gives you a reason. Notice there's an explanation section that tells you why. And if you click accept, it's going to change for the next story. So when after the student looks at their medals and they go back to that select a story page, this student's going to be in a whole new level. Level 3.5, story goal remains the same, but we're putting him in a slightly higher level. Okay, so that Data Mentor provided you with that suggestion. You need to know why it gave you that suggestion so that you can decide whether or not you agree with it. But clicking that accept button is all you need to do. Let's take a look at another student, Anna. We're going to look at that Students at a Glance report. Her data is the very first student on this list. I'm going to leave this data available for you to view on my slide. And we're going to ask, is her average cold timing score in the range for her placement? So this time I'm not going to show you with my cursor. I want you to find the series that she's working in. I'm sorry, the level that she's working in and her average cold timing score. Take those two pieces of information and plug them into that placement table. Is her cold timing in the range for the level she's working in? Yes, it is. She's working in 5.6. Her cold timing average is 90. That's right within the range. Her quiz is way over on the right side. She's doing fine on her quiz. So she's right in the range. She's doing well on her quiz. What do you think you'd do? Would you continue her in 5.6? Would you raise her to a higher level? Or would you lower her to a lower level? You're going to continue her, right? If this was placement day, what you're doing is you're checking to make sure they're in the right spot. And if on placement day, Anna read 90 words on the placement passage of mid-fifth grade level, the computer would have said pick 5.6. Okay. When you decide to leave a student in a level, you need to take a look at their goal. And it's important to understand that students who are lower grades, the difference between their cold timing and their goal tends to be about 30. Higher grades is more like 40. You want the student's cold timing score to be 30 away from the goal in young students and 40 away from the goal with older students. You want their hot timing score to be just a little bit above their goal. So think about that for a minute. When you do a pass timing with a student, that pass or hot timing score needs to meet their goal or they don't pass, right? So their average hot timing score is going to be at least at their goal. But if it's way above their goal, that's an indication that the goal is too easy. So if their goal is 100 and their average cold time or their average hot timing score is 20 words away when you want it to be 30 or 50 words away when you want it to be 40. If it's far away, then an adjustment's needed. What do we consider far away is when you get to a double digit, okay? So if the difference of where it is 10 or more words, then a change is needed. The last thing you look at is how many times they practice. So I'm going to explain this information again, but just in picture format, okay? So the story goal and the cold timing score are going to be about 30 words apart for young students, about 40 words apart for older students. The hot timing score and the goal should be pretty close to each other. Hot timing is likely to be a little bit above it. but they should be close. So if you look across the top of this table, or I'm sorry, this graph, you'll see the cold timing score is 91, the hot timing score is 123, and the goal is 120. So the difference between the cold timing and the goal is about 30. The difference between the hot timing and the goal is about 3. So we're going to ask ourselves these 3 questions with all the data available, and we'll ask one at a time. So does the goal exceed the cold timing score by about 40? Here's the goal. Here's the cold timing score. I love this report, this part of this report, because you are comparing numbers to the goal, and the goal is in between cold timing and hot timing. So you're comparing the cold timing and the goal to each other, and then you're also going to compare the goal and the hot timing. So it's sandwiched between the 2 numbers you use to compare. So for Anna, it's only 30 words away. We want it to be 40 because she's an older student. So it's 10 words away from where it should be. If her average cold timing score was 90 on placement day, the computer would have suggested a goal of 130, right? Because the computer would have added 40 to that cold timing of 90. Okay, so I'm thinking maybe the goal's a little easy. The difference between her goal and her hot timing score is 12 words. That's the double-digit difference. It's not that we don't want it that way. It just means that an adjustment's likely needed if it is that way. And she does practice between 3 and 10 times. So she is practicing 6 times. So her average cold timing and her goal are not about 40 words apart. They're only about 30. There's a double-digit difference between the goal and the hot timing score, but she's practicing the right number of times. So what do you think Data Mentor will suggest, and what would you do? Would you want to continue Anna with the goal of 120? Would you want to raise Anna to a higher goal, or would you want to lower Anna to a lower goal? I would raise her. I'd put her with a goal of 130. Data Mentor is going to agree with me. Surprise, surprise. It's going to have a red dot on the Data Mentor tab on the Pass Review work page. And when I click on that tab, it's going to suggest that I change the goal from 120 to 130. And if I click Accept, Anna is going to, when she goes to the Select a Story page, she's still in 5.6. See, her story, she still has 3 stories that she's passed, but her goal has gone from 120 to 130. So it happened just like that. The change was made. Okay. Now let's take a look at Lee. Lee is a 3rd grade student. We're going to look at the students at a glance report. He's the bottom student on this report. So I'm going to have all that data available for you to look at. And we're going to ask ourselves, is his average cold timing score in the range for placement? So the 2 pieces of information you need, the level he's working in and his average cold timing score. Here's the cold timing score. He's working in 2.5, which is right within the range. We want 30 to 60 for this to be the right level. He's reading 41 words correct. His quiz is strong at 87, so I'm not worried about this being too challenging from a content standpoint. So his score is in the range and his quiz is good enough. What would you do? Would you continue Lee in 2.5, raise him, or lower him? You're going to continue him. Now, every once in a while, someone will say, but his comprehension's so strong, wouldn't you want to put him in a higher level? And you wouldn't. 41 words correct per minute is slow. It's hard. These words are challenging for him. We want him to become more automatic with the words at this level before we increase the difficulty of the words. So from a fluency standpoint, he's in the right spot. His comprehension is solid, which is great, but I'm not going to raise it based only on comprehension because his fluency is still very low. 41 words correct per minute is a difficult read for Lee. So now we're going to decide whether or not his goal is correct. Let's take a look at his data one more time. The difference between his goal and his cold timing score is 29 words. That's about right where we want it. You're not going to get much closer than that. Lee's a 3rd grader, so we want there to be about a 30-word difference, and there is. His hot timing and his goal is only 4 words apart. So just a single digit. That's pretty close. That's close enough. He's practicing 6 times. So yes, the difference between his cold timing and his goal is appropriate. Yes, the difference between his hot timing and his goal is appropriate. And yes, the number of times he's practicing is appropriate. So he's in the right level and he has the right goal. And when you get to the pass review work page, the Data Mentor tab will still be there, but there will not be a red dot on it. It's still clickable. If you click on it, it's just going to tell you that Data Mentor does not have any suggestions at this time. Does that mean you can't make a change? No, it doesn't. You can go in and make a change, and I'm going to show you how to in just a minute. But it is not recommending a change at this point or suggesting a change at this point. There's another place where you can see whether or not there's a Data Mentor suggestion. So if you think, oh, shoot, I've got a bunch of kids who've already passed 3 stories and I haven't even looked, I didn't notice that tab, that's okay. You can go back and look and see if the students have suggestions. You don't have to wait until they get to the pass review work spot. So there's always this teacher button in the upper right-hand corner of the student screen. So whenever the student is working, wherever they're at, when they come in to class tomorrow, if you want to see if there's a suggestion for each student, you click on that teacher button and you enter your login information. And there is a tab on the side of the teacher menu that is for Data Mentor. And see, it says the same thing as it did on the pass review work page. It says Data Mentor does not have any suggestions at this time. Okay. If you wanted to manually change the level and the goal, if you look down a little couple rows below Data Mentor, there's a place where you can change series level and goal from here. You can also do it from the staff module. Okay, so those changes can be made. I'm going to pop out for just 1 minute and so I can show you how to do it from the staff module. When I'm on my home page, I want to go to the student activity page. And if I locate my student, if I want to make a change, notice this little caret next to my student's name. Anytime you see one of those greater than signs or carets, it means it's collapsible, expandable. So if you click on it, you'll get additional information. So here under Read Naturally Live, if I wanted to change Molly's series level or goal, to the far right of the assignment column, there's a picture of a piece of paper and a pencil. And when I hover over it, it says change assignment. Okay, so again, here's the assignment column. And in Read Naturally Live, she's assigned to this series level and goal. If I want to change it manually, I click on change assignment and I can adjust her series, I can adjust her level, and or I can adjust her goal. I would click save and close and then the change would occur. Okay, so that's how you can make that change from the staff module. So checking initial placement has gotten much easier since the release of Data Mentor. The process is fairly simple, but everything when it's new can be challenging. And so we hope that the Data Mentor feature can be a support to you. We hope that you reach out to us with your questions as they come up. That's what we're here for. So our contact information is available on the slide. Please feel free to call our tech support if you have a question about how to run the reports or how to access any information. And if you have a question about what you should do with a student's data, you're not sure which adjustment to make, please feel free to call me or anyone else in our curriculum team can help you with those more implementation and educational questions. Thanks again for your time today and everything you do for your students. We appreciate it. Take care.